Hello there, and welcome back to the Sleepy Ocean. Tonight, we are going to shrink our perspective down to the micro-wilderness of the rainforest floor, stepping away from the vast, rolling tides of the open sea to explore a creature that lives in the humid shadows of the Indonesian archipelago. We are journeying to the banks of small, freshwater streams in Java and Sulawesi to meet the vampire crab. To understand this tiny, jewel-like being, you must first imagine the atmosphere of its home, a world defined not by the crashing of waves, but by the heavy, enveloping blanket of tropical humidity. The air here is thick and warm, smelling of wet earth, decaying leaves, and the sweet fermentation scent of the jungle floor. It is a place of eternal twilight, where the sun struggles to penetrate the dense canopy of teak and banyan trees, filtering down in dappled shafts of green and gold that illuminate the mossy rocks where these crabs make their hidden kingdoms. In this quiet, dripping world, the vampire crab moves with the delicate precision of a watchmaker, a creature of the land that has never forgotten the water, carrying the memory of the ocean in its gills as it scuttles through the undergrowth. The name of this creature, the vampire crab, evokes images of gothic horror and blood-drinking monsters. But the reality is far more innocent and visually striking. They were not named for their diet, for they do not drink blood, nor do they hunt the veins of larger animals. They were named for their eyes. The vampire crab possesses eyes of a startling, vivid yellow, or sometimes a piercing orange, which stand in stark contrast to their deep purple or obsidian bodies. These eyes sit atop stalks that can move independently, glowing like tiny, sulfur-colored lanterns in the gloom of the rainforest floor. To a scientist or an explorer shining a flashlight into a dark crevice, these eyes reflect the light with an intensity that looks almost supernatural, giving the crab the appearance of a creature from a dark fairy tale. This striking visual feature is what captured the imagination of the world, transforming a humble scavenger of the riverbank into a celebrity of the invertebrate kingdom, a tiny icon of the mysterious beauty that hides in the smallest corners of the earth. The scientific genus to which these crabs belong is Geosesama, a name that hints at their deep connection to the earth rather than the open sea. Unlike their marine cousins, the blue crabs or the Dungeness crabs that scuttle across the ocean floor, the Geosesama are semi-terrestrial. They have evolved to conquer the land, trading the infinite blue of the Pacific for the vertical complexity of the rainforest. They are climbers, diggers, and explorers of the root systems. However, their conquest of the land is not absolute. They remain tethered to the freshwater streams and pools by a biological necessity that dictates their every movement. They must keep their bodies moist to breathe, living in a perpetual state of dampness. Their existence is a balancing act between the dry air that offers them freedom and the water that offers them life, a frantic but slow-motion dance along the muddy margins of the river where the soil is always soft and the air is always heavy with mist. The coloration of the vampire crab is one of the most spectacular displays of biopigmentation in the animal world, rivaling the beauty of poison dart frogs or tropical butterflies. The most famous species, Geosesama denala, is draped in a suit of deep royal purple. This is not a dull, muddy purple, but a vibrant, electric violet that covers its claws and carapace. On its back, it often bears a patch of creamy white or pale yellow, looking like a splash of paint on a dark canvas. Another species, Geosesama hagen, takes the opposite approach, wearing a coat of fiery red and bright orange, earning it the nickname the Red Devil. These colors are not painted on the surface, but are embedded deep within the chitin of their exoskeletons. In the dim light of the jungle, these colors might seem counterintuitive for camouflage. But amidst the fallen, rotting fruit and the colorful, decaying leaves of the tropical floor, the patches of purple and red help break up the crab's outline, allowing it to disappear into the chaotic mosaic of the rainforest floor. Despite their fearsome name and brilliant colors, the vampire crab is incredibly small, a detail that is often lost in photographs that zoom in to show their intricate features. An adult vampire crab typically spans only 1 to 2 inches in width, including its legs. Its main body, the carapace, is often smaller than a bottle cap. This diminutive size means that their world is one of towering obstacles and immense distances. A fallen log is a mountain range to be traversed. A puddle is a vast lake. They live in the macro world, where a single moss frond is a sheltering tree and a pebble is a boulder. Their smallness allows them to occupy niches that larger animals ignore, slipping into the narrow spaces between tree roots or hiding inside the curled cup of a dead leaf. They are the secret residents of the forest floor, living their entire lives within a territory that might be no larger than a kitchen table, yet filled with all the drama and struggle of the wider world. The respiratory system of the vampire crab is a marvel of evolutionary modification, adapting the machinery of the sea for life in the air. Like all crabs, they possess gills, which are typically designed to extract oxygen from water. However, the gills of the Geosesama have been transformed into something resembling a lung. The gill chambers are large and highly vascularized, lined with a dense network of blood vessels that can absorb oxygen directly from the air, provided the tissues remain wet. This is why the humidity of the Indonesian rainforest is not just a comfort, but a requirement for survival. The crab carries a thin film of water over its gills at all times. If the air becomes too dry, or if the crab ventures too far from the moisture, its gills will dry out, the gas exchange will stop, and the crab will suffocate. They are essentially wearing a scuba tank made of water, breathing the air through a liquid filter that they must constantly replenish by dipping into the stream or burrowing into the damp mud. The feeding habits of the vampire crab reveal it to be a gentle opportunist rather than a vicious predator. It is an omnivore, which in the context of the rainforest floor means it is a janitor. It feeds primarily on detritus, dead organic matter. It picks through the leaf litter with its small, delicate claws, searching for decaying leaves, rotting fruit that has fallen from the canopy, and the carcasses of tiny insects. It plays a crucial role in the decomposition cycle of the forest, breaking down organic material and returning nutrients to the soil. Occasionally, it will hunt small, live prey like springtails, woodlice, or larvae, ambushing them with a quick snap of its pincers. But mostly, it is a grazer of the microscopic garden, using its chelae, its claws, like chopsticks, to pick up tiny morsels of algae and fungus, eating with a fastidious, rhythmic motion that looks almost polite. The claws of the vampire crab, while small, are versatile tools used for communication as much as for feeding. In the dim light of the jungle, visual signals are important. The males often have larger, brighter claws than the females. When two males encounter each other in a dispute over territory or a hiding spot, they perform a ritualized dance. They raise their claws high in the air, spreading them wide to display their size and color. They may tap the ground or wave their pincers in specific patterns. This semaphore is a way to settle conflicts without violence. The crab, with the larger, brighter display, usually wins the standoff, and the loser scuttles away. Actual physical combat is rare and risky, as a damaged limb can be a death sentence in the wild. Thus, the vampires settle their wars with a show of hands, posturing in the twilight to establish the hierarchy of the riverbank. The molting process is the most vulnerable and transformative event in the life of a vampire crab. Because their skeleton is on the outside, they cannot grow gradually. They must grow in sudden, dangerous bursts. When the crab has grown too large for its shell, it reabsorbs calcium from its old exoskeleton to soften it. It finds a secure, hidden location, deep in a burrow or under a rock, and begins the exhausting process of extricating itself. The old shell splits along the back, and the crab must slowly pull its body out, sliding its legs and claws out of the old casing like pulling fingers out of a tight glove. This process can take hours. When it emerges, the crab is soft, pliable, and defenseless. It must pump its body up with water to expand its new soft shell to a larger size before it hardens. During this time, it cannot fight or run effectively. It is a soft, jelly-like ghost of itself, hiding in the dark until the chemistry of its body rebuilds its armor. Remarkably, this molting process also grants the vampire crab the power of regeneration. If a crab loses a leg or a claw to a predator or a rival, it is not gone forever. At the site of the injury, a small limb bud begins to form, curled up inside the shell. During the next molt, when the crab steps out of its old skin, the new limb unfurls. It may be smaller than the original at first, but with each successive molt, it grows larger until it is indistinguishable from the others. This ability to rebuild its own body allows the crab to survive the rough and tumble life of the rainforest floor. It is a biological insurance policy, ensuring that a single mistake or a narrow escape does not leave the animal permanently crippled. The crab is a self-repairing machine, constantly renewing itself in the safety of its burrow. The eyes of the vampire crab are compound eyes, consisting of hundreds of tiny hexagonal lenses called ommatidia. Each lens captures a small piece of the visual field, which the crab's brain assembles into a mosaic image. This type of vision is excellent for detecting motion, a predator approaching from the side, or a rival crab waving a claw, registers as a shift in the pattern of light and shadow. The bright yellow color of the eyes is not just for show. It may act as a filter, enhancing contrast in the low-light conditions of the rainforest understory. While they may not see fine detail as clearly as a human, their ability to sense movement is superior. They live in a world of flickering shadows and sudden shifts, where seeing the movement of a bird or a lizard a fraction of a second sooner means the difference between life and death. The relationship between the vampire crab and the water is complex because, despite having gills, they are terrible swimmers. If a vampire crab falls into deep water with steep sides, it can easily drown. They are adapted for wading, not swimming. Their legs are designed for gripping rock and soil, not for paddling. They prefer the riparian zone, the interface where the land meets the water. They hang out in the shallows, where the water is only a few millimeters deep, allowing them to keep their gills wet while keeping their bodies anchored on solid ground. They are creatures of the edge, living on the damp banks where they can dip in and out. A deep, fast-flowing river is a barrier to them, a dangerous abyss that they avoid. Their ocean is a puddle, a shallow film of water that coats the stones, safe and manageable for a creature that walks on the bottom. The reproductive strategy of the Geosasama genus is one of the key features that distinguishes them from marine crabs and allows them to conquer the rainforest. Most crabs, like those in the ocean, release thousands of microscopic larvae into the water, where they drift as plankton before metamorphosing. This requires a large body of water and is perilous. Vampire crabs, however, practice direct development. The female produces fewer, larger eggs compared to marine crabs. She carries these eggs under her abdomen, tucked safely against her body in a brood pouch. Inside these large eggs, The babies go through all their larval stages. When they finally hatch, they emerge not as microscopic plankton, but as fully formed, miniature versions of their parents. These tiny crabs, often no bigger than a grain of rice, crawl off their mother's back and immediately begin life on the forest floor. This adaptation frees them from the need for the ocean, allowing them to live their entire life cycle inland, high in the mountains or deep in the jungle, miles away from the sea. The maternal care of the vampire crab extends beyond just carrying the eggs. There is a brief period of guardianship. After the tiny crabs hatch, they may linger near the mother for a few days, using her presence as a shield against predators. The mother, usually aggressive towards other crabs, will tolerate her own offspring crawling over her carapace. This head start is crucial. The rainforest floor is teeming with predators. Ants, spiders, centipedes that would view a baby crab as a snack. By skipping the planktonic stage and emerging as a crawling, armored, albeit softly creature, the young vampire crab has a much higher survival rate. They are born ready to hide, ready to dig, and ready to participate in the quiet ecosystem of the stream bank. The nocturnal habits of the vampire crab mean that their world wakes up when the sun goes down. During the heat of the day, the rainforest can be oppressive, and the risk of dehydration is high. So, the crabs retreat into their burrows. Tunnels they dig into the soft mud of the riverbank, or hide under the cool, damp arch of a piece of driftwood. As the sun sets and the temperature drops, the humidity rises and the forest floor comes alive. The crabs emerge from their bunkers. Their yellow eyes glow in the moonlight. They begin their nightly patrol, scavenging for food and interacting with one another. The silence of the day is replaced by the rustling of the night, the chorus of frogs and crickets providing the soundtrack to their nocturnal activities. They are shadows moving within shadows, conducting the business of their lives under the cover of darkness. The geographical isolation of the islands of Java and Sulawesi has played a massive role in the evolution of these crabs. The mountains and valleys of these islands create sky islands of habitat, isolated patches of rainforest separated by unsuitable terrain. This isolation acts as an evolutionary laboratory. Populations of crabs in one valley may be cut off from those in the next valley for thousands or millions of years. This separation allows them to drift apart genetically, evolving different colors and behaviors. This is why there are so many distinct color morphs of Geosasama. The red devil might live in one specific river system, while the purple vampire lives in another just a few miles away. They are a testament to the power of isolation, speciation occurring in real time in the fractured geography of the archipelago. The exoskeleton of the vampire crab is made of chitin, a derivative of glucose that is strong, flexible, and resistant to decay. This material is the same stuff that makes up the cell walls of mushrooms and the shells of insects. In the vampire crab, the chitin is reinforced with calcium carbonate minerals extracted from the water and their diet. This creates a composite material that is light enough to allow for agile movement on land, but strong enough to provide protection. The vibrant colors we admire are created by chromatophores, pigment, containing and light-reflecting cells, layered within the chitin. The interplay of light hitting these layers creates the iridescent purple or the matte orange. It is a suit of biological plastic, a wondrous material that serves as skin, skeleton, and billboard all at once. The interaction between the vampire crab and the flora of the rainforest is intimate and structural. They often make their homes in the root systems of terrestrial plants that grow near the water. The intricate, tangled roots of ferns and mosses provide a three-dimensional labyrinth that is perfect for a small crab. The roots hold the soil together, preventing the crab's burrow from collapsing, while the crab's digging aerates the soil around the roots. They also climb. Vampire crabs are surprisingly agile climbers, scaling the mossy stalks of plants or the rough bark of trees to escape rising water levels during heavy rains or to find food. They have been found living in the water-filled axils of bromeliads and other plants high above the ground, effectively becoming arboreal for periods of time, expanding their territory from the mud to the canopy. The sensory hairs that cover the legs and claws of the vampire crab are their primary way of interacting with the physical world. Since they are active at night and often in muddy environments, vision is not always enough. These tiny bristle-like hairs, called setae, are mechanoreceptors. They are incredibly sensitive to touch and vibration. They can feel the texture of the ground, the current of the water, and even the vibrations of a predator's footsteps through the soil. They also have chemoreceptors on their legs and antennae, allowing them to taste the ground as they walk. A vampire crab walking across a mossy rock is reading a rich tapestry of sensory information, feeling the dampness, tasting the chemical trails of other crabs, and sensing the stability of the terrain with every step. The discovery of these crabs by the scientific community is a story that highlights the strange relationship between the pet trade and biology. For years, vampire crabs were known to aquarium hobbyists, traded for their beautiful colors, but they were undescribed by science. Their origins were a trade secret, their natural habitats unknown. It wasn't until around 2015 that researchers, working backward from the pet trade, finally tracked the crabs to their source in central Java. They found them living in the wild, not as mysterious monsters, but as abundant residents of the riverbanks. This late discovery underscores how much of the micro-world remains unexplored. These dazzling creatures had been living their quiet, colorful lives in the mud for millions of years, entirely unnoticed by the catalogers of nature until the very recent present. As we drift deeper into the life of the vampire crab, we must consider the acoustics of their environment. The riverbank is never silent. The sound of running water is a constant, white noise backdrop that masks the tiny sounds of the crabs themselves. The scuttling of their legs on dry leaves, the soft clicking of their mouth parts, the splash of a tiny body entering a pool. These are the sounds of the vampire crab, but they are whispered sounds, lost in the roar of the jungle rain and the flow of the stream. They live in a sonic landscape dominated by giants, where the call of a bird or the crash of a branch is a thunderclap. In this noisy world, the vampire crab is a silent actor, a pantomime of color and motion played out on the smallest stage of the rainforest. The specific microhabitat that supports the vampire crab is a geological feature often replicated by hobbyists, but rarely understood in its natural complexity: the paludarium environment. In the wild, this is not merely a wet bank, but a transition zone where the water table is so high that the soil becomes a semi-solid suspension of earth and liquid. The ground here is perpetually saturated, creating a hydric soil that is devoid of oxygen just a few inches below the surface. This creates a unique chemical environment. The crabs navigate a landscape where the ground squelches and shifts under their weight. They do not live on dry land, nor do they live in the open water. They live in the mud. This mud is rich in organic decay, a thick, black paste that holds moisture like a sponge. It buffers the temperature, keeping the crabs cool during the heat of the day. The stability of this mud is maintained by the roots of the immersed plants, creating a structural matrix that prevents the riverbank from washing away. The vampire crab is the master of this unstable terrain, moving across the slick, wet surface with a lightness that prevents it from sinking. A tiny traveler on a surface that is neither solid nor liquid. The volcanic origins of the islands of Java and Sulawesi provide a critical chemical component to the life of these crabs: the soil pH. The volcanoes that formed the archipelago spewed ash and mineral-rich lava for millions of years, creating a soil that is fertile and slightly acidic to neutral. This volcanic earth is packed with minerals like calcium, magnesium, and iron. For a crustacean that needs to build a hard shell, access to these minerals is vital. In the freshwater environment, calcium is harder to come by than in the ocean. The vampire crab obtains these building blocks from the detritus it eats and the water it drinks, which has leached minerals from the volcanic rock. The vibrant purple and orange colors of their shells may be influenced by the trace metals found in this volcanic soil, a direct link between the fire of the Earth's core and the biology of the riverbank. They are, in a sense, living gems forged from the mineral wealth of the volcano. The high humidity of the rainforest does more than just keep their gills wet. It fundamentally alters the way the vampire crab smells the world. In dry air, chemical molecules disperse quickly and are hard to detect. But in the heavy, moisture-laden air of the jungle, scent molecules cling to water droplets. The air is thick with information. The vampire crab possesses chemoreceptors on its antennae and on the tips of its legs. These sensors taste the humidity. They can detect the pheromones of a potential mate drifting in the mist, or the scent of a rotting mango from yards away. The humidity acts as a carrier signal, amplifying the chemical conversation of the forest floor. When a vampire crab flicks its antennae, it is sampling this rich, damp atmosphere, reading the air as if it were a liquid, navigating a landscape defined by invisible plumes of odor that hang in the stillness of the understory. Beneath the colorful exterior of the vampire crab lies a survival instinct that is ruthless and necessary: cannibalism. In the confined spaces of the riverbank, territory is limited. When the population density becomes too high, the crabs turn on each other. This is particularly dangerous for a crab that has just molted. The soft, vulnerable crab emits a specific chemical signature that others can detect. If it does not hide well enough, it will be eaten by its neighbors, perhaps even its own siblings. This cannibalism serves as a natural population control, ensuring that the number of crabs does not exceed the carrying capacity of the habitat. It recycles the nutrients of the weak back into the strong. It is a grim reality of the micro world, where your neighbor is your competitor and potentially your predator, forcing every individual to maintain a constant state of vigilance and defense. The evolutionary lineage of the Geosesama genus traces back to the Grapsidae family, the shore crabs that scuttle over rocks at the beach. However, the vampire crab has undergone a divergence known as terrestrialization. Millions of years ago, their ancestors moved from the intertidal zone of the ocean into the mangrove swamps, and then further inland, following the freshwater rivers up into the mountains. This journey required a complete rewriting of their biology. They had to lose the dependence on salt. They had to adapt their kidneys to retain ions rather than excrete them. They had to change their reproduction to eliminate the need for the sea. This migration is one of the great evolutionary treks, a journey from the infinite ocean to the top of a volcano, driven by the pressure to find new niches and escape the crowded competition of the coast. The locomotion of the vampire crab is distinct from the swimming gait of marine crabs. It is a true walk. A swimming crab has back legs flattened into paddles. The vampire crab has legs that are long, slender, and pointed at the tips. These tips, called dactyls, act like crampons or cleats. They dig into the moss and the wood, allowing the crab to climb vertical surfaces. When they run, they use an alternating tripod gait, where 3 legs support the body while the others move forward. This provides immense stability on uneven terrain. They can scramble over piles of wet leaves or navigate the slippery surface of a wet rock without losing their footing. Their movement is jerky and rapid, a series of short sprints and sudden stops. They are built for agility on a complex, three-dimensional obstacle course, moving with a mechanical efficiency that defies gravity. The architecture of a vampire crab burrow is a feat of excavation, performed with tools the size of tweezers. The crab uses its claws to dig, scooping out pellets of mud and carrying them to the surface. The burrow is not just a hole, it is a climate-controlled bunker. It usually extends down to the water table, ensuring that the bottom of the burrow is always filled with a small pool of water. This personal swimming pool allows the crab to rehydrate and keep its gills wet without leaving the safety of its home. The tunnel often has a bend or a turn to prevent light from entering and to stop predators like snakes from reaching the bottom easily. The walls are smoothed and packed tight to prevent collapse. A single riverbank can be honeycombed with these tunnels, a hidden city of thousands of residents living just inches beneath the surface of the mud. Living alongside the vampire crab in a relationship of accidental symbiosis are colonies of springtails. These microscopic, insect-like creatures feed on mold and fungus. In the humid burrow of a crab, leftover food scraps can quickly grow mold that would be harmful to the crab's health. The springtails move in and consume this waste, keeping the burrow clean. In return, the springtails sometimes become a snack for the crab, but their primary role is that of a janitorial service. This relationship highlights the complexity of the micro-ecosystem. The crab provides the home and the food scraps. The springtails provide the sanitation. It is a balance of hygiene and predation, a tiny circle of life playing out in the dark, damp tunnel of a crustacean. The threat of deforestation in Indonesia poses an existential risk to these creatures because of their extreme endemism. Many species of Geosesama are found only in a single valley or on a single hill. They do not migrate long distances. If the forest covering their specific stream is cut down to make way for a plantation or a farm, the microclimate changes instantly. The humidity drops, the temperature spikes, and the soil dries out. The crabs cannot simply move to the next forest. They are trapped by the dry land in between. The loss of the canopy is a death sentence. The vampire crab is inextricably linked to the shade. They are the spirits of the specific trees that shelter them, and when the trees fall, the crabs vanish, their vibrant colors fading into the dust of the exposed earth. The genetic phenomenon of polymorphism explains why vampire crabs of the same species can look so different. Within a single population of Geosesama denale, you might find individuals that are deep purple, some that are lighter lilac, and some with varying patterns of white on their backs. This genetic variation is a buffer against extinction. If the environment changes, perhaps the color of the leaf litter shifts due to a change in vegetation, different color morphs might have a survival advantage. It is nature hedging its bets. The red devil and the vampire are just the most striking examples of a genetic palette that is constantly being mixed by the pressures of the jungle. A swirling experiment in color that helps the species adapt to the shifting kaleidoscope of the rainforest floor. The mating ritual of the vampire crab involves a form of communication that is felt rather than heard, seismic drumming. The male crab uses his legs to tap against the substrate, the log, or the rock he is standing on. He creates a rhythmic vibration that travels through the solid material. The female, standing nearby, feels this drumming through her own legs. Her sensors pick up the specific frequency and tempo of the tap. This seismic song allows them to communicate without making a sound that would attract predators. It is a private serenade transmitted through the earth itself. The male may also wave his claws in time with the drumming, a multimedia performance of dance and vibration intended to convince the female that he is the fittest partner in the darkness. To receive these signals, the vampire crab possesses a specialized organ in its legs known as the subgenual organ, or a functional equivalent used by crustaceans to detect substrate-borne vibrations. This sensitivity is so acute that they can detect the footfalls of a human walking yards away. This is why they are so hard to catch. They feel you coming long before they see you. The ground acts as an extension of their ears. When a heavy rain starts to fall, the impact of the droplets on the ground creates a chaotic noise in their sensory world, a static of vibrations that signals a change in the weather. They live in a tactile soundscape, reading the tremors of the earth to navigate their social and physical reality. The challenge of osmoregulation in a freshwater environment is one of the greatest physiological hurdles the vampire crab has overcome. In the ocean, the salt concentration is similar to the crab's internal fluids. In fresh water, the water constantly tries to rush into the crab's body via osmosis, threatening to burst its cells, while valuable salts try to leak out. To survive, the vampire crab has evolved super-efficient kidneys and gills that actively pump ions like sodium and chloride back into the blood. They produce very dilute urine to expel the excess water while keeping the salts. This constant chemical pumping requires energy. A significant portion of the food they eat goes solely to powering the cellular pumps that keep them from dissolving or exploding in the fresh mountain water. The mouthparts of the vampire crab are a complex set of nested doors known as maxillipeds. The outermost pair are broad and flat, acting like a shield to cover the delicate inner mouthparts. When the crab feeds, these doors open to reveal a set of mandibles and maxillae designed for shredding and sorting. The crab does not just bite, it manipulates the food. It uses these inner mouthparts to filter out mud and sand, selecting only the organic particles. They have tiny, hair-like setae on their mouthparts that can taste the food as they handle it. Watching a vampire crab eat is like watching a machine sort mail. The claws pass the material to the mouth, where it is rapidly inspected, tasted, sorted, and consumed or rejected. A flurry of microscopic activity hidden behind the armored doors of the face. The metabolic rate of the vampire crab is dictated by the ambient temperature, making them ectothermic or cold-blooded. In the tropical heat, their metabolism is fast. They move quickly, eat often, and grow rapidly. But if the temperature drops, perhaps during a heavy storm or in the cooler mountain altitudes, they slow down. They do not shiver to keep warm. They simply exist at a lower energy state. This reliance on external heat means they are slaves to the sun and the air. Their daily activity cycle is a thermal map of the forest. They move between warm rocks and cool burrows to regulate their body temperature manually, piloting their own biology by moving through the microclimates of the riverbank. The interaction with rain is a trigger for mass activity among vampire crabs. While they need moisture, a heavy downpour can flood their burrows. When the monsoon rains hit, the crabs are often forced out of their tunnels. This can lead to mass migrations or aggregations on higher ground. The rain also washes nutrients into the stream and softens the detritus, making it easier to eat. For the crab, rain is a mixed blessing. It brings food and moisture, but it also brings the danger of flooding and displacement. They have evolved to sense the drop in barometric pressure that precedes a storm, giving them time to scramble to higher branches or secure rocks before the deluge begins. The lifespan of a vampire crab is a brief flash of color in the long history of the forest. They typically live for only 2 to 3 years. This short life cycle drives their biology to be fast-paced. They reach sexual maturity in less than 6 months. This rapid turnover means that evolution can act quickly on their populations. A change in the environment can alter the genetic makeup of the group in just a few generations. They are the fruit flies of the decapod world, living fast, breeding early, and dying young. This brevity adds a poignant quality to their beauty. The vibrant purple shell is a temporary bloom, destined to fade and return to the soil in a matter of months. When faced with a predator that cannot be outrun or fought, the vampire crab employs a defense mechanism known as thanatosis, or playing dead. The crab will pull its legs tight against its body, tuck its claws in, and remain perfectly motionless. It becomes a pebble. By suppressing its movement, it removes the visual trigger that many predators rely on. A lizard or a bird scans for motion. A static object is ignored. The crab can hold this pose for minutes, waiting for the threat to pass. It requires immense neurological control to override the instinct to flee. It is a gamble of stillness, betting its life on the assumption that the predator is only interested in things that run. The predators of the vampire crab are the other residents of the undergrowth. Small monitor lizards, kingfishers, and even large huntsman spiders view the crab as a crunchy meal. The crab's shell offers some protection, but a sharp beak or a strong jaw can crush it. This predation pressure forces the crabs to be secretive. They rarely venture into open spaces. They stick to the edge habitat, where cover is always within reach. The vibrant colors that we find so beautiful are, in the wild, often hidden under mud or leaves. The crab is a jewel that tries very hard not to be seen, living in a constant game of hide and seek with the giants of the jungle. The export of nutrients by the vampire crab connects the aquatic and terrestrial worlds in a process known as land-water coupling. By eating detritus in the water or at the water's edge, and then defecating on land, or by dying on land, the crabs move nutrients from the stream to the forest floor. They are biological conveyors. They take the energy of the river, the algae, the aquatic insects, and bring it up the bank to fertilize the plants. This nutrient loop is vital for the health of the riparian zone. The lush moss and ferns that line the riverbank are fed, in part, by the activity of the crabs. The vampire crab is a gardener, tending the soil of its home with the waste of its life, knitting the ecosystem together with its tiny, scuttling legs. The shedding of the exoskeleton, or exuviation, is not just about growth. It is a method of detoxification. Over time, the crab's shell absorbs toxins and heavy metals from the environment. By molting, the crab sheds this toxic load. It leaves the old contaminated shell behind and steps out with a fresh, clean barrier. This allows them to survive in environments that might be mildly polluted or chemically challenging. However, the crab often eats its old shell to reclaim the calcium. This recycling is a calculated risk. It reclaims the minerals, but potentially re-ingests the toxins. The crab must balance the need for calcium with the need to detoxify. A chemical tightrope walk performed during the vulnerability of the molt. The structure of the vampire crab's eye stalks allows them to fold the eyes down into protective grooves on the front of the carapace. This creates a streamlined, armored front end. When digging or squeezing through tight roots, the eyes are tucked away, safe from scratches and dirt. When the crab emerges, the stalks pop up like periscopes. This ability to deploy and retract their primary sense organ is essential for a burrowing animal. It protects the delicate lenses from the abrasive reality of the underground. The crab faces the world with a retractable gaze, shielding its vision until the moment it is needed. The social hierarchy of a vampire crab colony is often dictated by the highest point. In a terrarium or a natural rock pile, the dominant male will claim the highest perch. From this vantage point, he can survey the territory and spot rivals or mates. Being high up also offers a better angle for broadcasting chemical signals in the air currents. The lower-ranking males and females occupy the crevices below. This vertical stratification organizes the community. If you look at a riverbank, you are seeing a multi-story apartment complex where the penthouse is occupied by the king of the colony, peering down with his yellow eyes at the subjects scuttling in the mud below. The specialized grooming behavior of the vampire crab is a constant activity. Their mouthparts contain cleaning brushes. They will pass their legs and claws through their mouths, using the brushes to scrape off mud, algae, and parasites. They also use their claws to pick debris off their eyes and carapace. This grooming is not vanity, it is survival. A buildup of algae on the shell can block the sensory hairs and weigh the crab down. Mud on the eyes blinds them. Clogged gills suffocate them. The crab must remain pristine to function. They are fastidious scrubbers, spending hours maintaining the machinery of their bodies to ensure that every sensor and every joint is working at peak efficiency in the messy, muddy world they inhabit. The adaptability of the Geosasama to captivity has inadvertently saved some populations while threatening others. The global demand for these crabs in the aquarium trade has led to over-harvesting in some specific locales. However, it has also created a captive breeding population distributed around the world. Hobbyists are now breeding vampire crabs in Germany, the USA, and Japan. This ex situ population acts as a genetic reservoir. If a volcanic eruption or a deforestation event were to wipe out a wild population in Java, the species might still exist in the tanks of enthusiasts. It is a precarious safety net, reliant on the passion of humans who fell in love with the purple crab with the yellow eyes. The nocturnal vision of the vampire crab is aided by a reflective layer behind the retina, similar to the tapetum lucidum in cats, although less developed. This allows them to make the most of the faint starlight or moonlight that filters through the canopy. They can navigate in conditions that we would consider pitch black. This low light sensitivity allows them to avoid the diurnal predators, like birds. They own the night. When the sun vanishes, the riverbank becomes their domain, a dark kingdom where they can forage and fight without the fear of being spotted from above. The role of the vampire crab in the food web is that of a mesopredator and a macro-decomposer. They sit in the middle. They eat the waste and the tiny bugs, and they are eaten by the larger animals. This middle position is critical. They facilitate the flow of energy from the bottom of the pyramid to the top. Without them, the decomposition of leaf litter would be slower, and the small predators would have less food. They are the gears in the engine of the rainforest, turning the dead leaves into living prey, keeping the energy of the ecosystem moving upward. In the end, the vampire crab teaches us that the boundary between the land and the sea is permeable. They are ocean creatures that have learned to climb mountains. They carry the ancient design of the crab, the armor, the claws, the gills, into the heart of the jungle. They are a reminder that life is fluid, constantly pushing into new territories, adapting the old tools for new purposes. In the quiet, humid dark of the Indonesian forest, the crab sits on a mossy log, a tiny purple conqueror that has claimed the earth without ever forgetting the water. Under the filtered light of the moon penetrating the canopy, the exoskeleton of the vampire crab reveals a hidden dimension of its biology that is invisible to the human eye, but glaringly obvious to other creatures of the rainforest. When exposed to ultraviolet light, which is naturally present in small amounts even in the twilight, the shell of the crab exhibits biofluorescence. The proteins interwoven with the chitin of its carapace absorb the high-energy UV wavelengths and re-emit them as a ghostly, greenish-yellow glow. This phenomenon suggests that the crabs may see each other very differently than we see them. To a predator or a rival crab with UV-sensitive vision, the dark purple body might not be a cloak of invisibility, but a canvas painted with glowing patterns that signal health, age, or species identity. The riverbank at night, to the eyes of a crab, is not a place of shadows, but a landscape lit by the secret, internal fire of the inhabitants, where the boundaries of territory are marked by living neon signs scuttling through the moss. Deep within the stomach of the vampire crab, long before it ever begins the dangerous process of molting, a pair of biological stones known as gastroliths begin to form. These are concretions of pure calcium carbonate that the crab manufactures by pulling minerals out of its own shell and blood. As the molt approaches, the crab dissolves the inner layers of its old exoskeleton, turning its armor back into liquid calcium, which is then stored in these stomach stones. They look like tiny white pearls or tablets hidden inside the animal. This internal hoarding is a survival strategy. It ensures that when the crab steps out of its old shell, it already carries the building blocks for the new one inside its gut. It does not have to hunt for calcium in the dangerous, soft-shelled phase. It simply dissolves the stones back into its blood and pumps the minerals out to its skin, hardening its new suit of armor from the inside out in a race against predators. The defensive mechanism known as autotomy allows the vampire crab to perform a drastic self-amputation that is both horrifying and life-saving. If a predator, such as a bird or a large lizard, grabs the crab by a leg, the crab can instantly sever the limb at a specific fracture plane near the base of the leg. This is not a tearing action, but a precise muscular reflex. A specialized sphincter muscle at the break point contracts immediately, sealing off the blood vessels to prevent bleeding. The predator is left holding a twitching leg while the crab escapes into the leaf litter. The loss is temporary, as the limb will regenerate, but the scar remains as a sealed portal, a testament to the crab's willingness to sacrifice a part of itself to save the whole, leaving a piece of its body behind as a decoy to ensure the survival of its genetic future. The phenomenon of bubbling or frothing at the mouth is a behavior often observed in vampire crabs when they are stressed or when the air is too dry. The crab releases a mixture of water and surfactants from its mouthparts, creating a dense foam of bubbles that covers its face. While this can look like a threat display, it is primarily a mechanism to prevent suffocation. By increasing the surface area of the water carried in its gill chambers, the bubbles allow for more oxygen absorption from the air. The foam acts as an emergency external lung, trapping oxygen in the bubbles and keeping the gill tissues moist. It is a desperate act of respiratory engineering, where the crab recycles its own internal fluids to create a wet atmosphere around its face, buying itself time until it can find a true water source. The specific interaction between the vampire crab and the freshwater shrimp of the Caridina genus reveals a tense but functioning micro-ecosystem in the stream below the bank. The crabs generally stay on the land, but when they venture into the water to molt or hydrate, they share space with these small, transparent shrimp. The shrimp are faster and more agile in the water, often darting in to steal food scraps dropped by the crab. However, the shrimp also perform a cleaning service, picking algae and fungus off the crab's shell while it sits in the shallows. This relationship balances on a knife edge. If the shrimp gets too close to the crab's claws, it becomes a meal. But if the crab remains still, the shrimp is a cleaner. It is a precarious alliance of convenience, negotiated in the shallow riffles, where the jurisdiction of the land predator overlaps with the scavenger of the current. The architecture of the female's pleopods, the specialized swimming legs under her abdomen, is modified entirely for the purpose of carrying heavy cargo. In marine crabs, these legs are feathery paddles used for swimming. In the vampire crab, they have evolved into sturdy, bristled hooks designed to grip the large eggs. The female uses a glue-like secretion to attach the eggs to the fine hairs of the pleopods. This attachment must be strong enough to hold the eggs as she climbs over rocks and roots, yet flexible enough to allow her to fan them with oxygenated water. She carries the future of her lineage like a heavy backpack strapped to her belly. The pleopods move in a rhythmic, undulating wave, constantly circulating air and moisture around the developing embryos. A mechanical cradle that rocks the unhatched crabs to sleep while the mother navigates the vertical world. The sensitivity of the vampire crab to copper is a chemical vulnerability that ties it to the pristine nature of its habitat. Copper is highly toxic to invertebrates, interfering with their oxygen transport and nervous systems. Even trace amounts of copper leached from pipes, coins, or pesticides can kill a vampire crab. This sensitivity makes them biological indicators of water quality. They cannot survive in polluted streams. Their presence in a waterway is a sign that the heavy metals are absent and the water is chemically pure. They are the guardians of the clean stream, thriving only where the water chemistry is untouched by the industrial footprint of humanity, living barometers that die at the first taste of metal in the water. The righting reflex of the vampire crab is a complex motor pattern hardwired into its nervous system to prevent it from being stranded on its back. If a crab falls from a branch or is flipped over by a rival, it is vulnerable. Its soft underbelly is exposed and its legs are flailing in the air. To correct this, the crab does not just thrash randomly. It extends one claw to anchor against the ground and uses its legs on the opposite side to push, creating a lever. It pivots its body with a precise rolling motion that flips it back onto its feet in less than a second. This reflex works on mud, rock, or even underwater. It is a gravity-defying somersault essential for a creature that spends its life climbing, ensuring that a fall is never fatal, merely a momentary inversion before the scuttling resumes. The dietary role of leaf litter in the vampire crab's life extends beyond simple nutrition. The specific type of leaf matters. They show a marked preference for the dried leaves of the Indian almond tree, Terminalia catappa, and teak trees. These leaves, as they decompose, release tannins and humic acids into the water and soil. The crabs graze on the bacterial and fungal films that grow on these rotting leaves. The tannins have mild antibacterial properties, which may help keep the crabs healthy. By consuming these leaves, the crabs are self-medicating, ingesting compounds that boost their immune systems. The forest floor is not just a buffet, it is a pharmacy, and the crabs are selective grazers, choosing the specific decay that keeps their shells hard and their bodies free of infection. The grooming of the eye stalks is a behavior of fastidious precision that occupies a significant portion of the vampire crab's waking hours. The eyes are their most important sensory organs, but living in mud puts them at risk of being fouled. To clean them, the crab uses its maxillipeds, the mouth parts, which are equipped with comb-like bristles. It will lower an eye stalk down to its mouth, where the maxillipeds gently brush and scrape the lens surface, removing dirt and algae. Then the eye pops back up, crystal clear. The crab will alternate eyes, wiping them clean like a driver cleaning a windshield. This ensures that their yellow lanterns remain bright and unclouded, maintaining the high-contrast vision needed to spot the subtle movements of predators in the twilight. The juvenile dispersal phase involves a dangerous journey from the mother's back to the wider world, a moment of separation that breaks the only social bond the crab will ever know. For the first few days of their lives, the tiny, fully formed crabs ride on their mother, protected by her aggression. But as their yolk reserves fade, hunger drives them away. They crawl down her legs and drop onto the moss. At this moment, they become competitors. The mother's maternal instinct evaporates, and she may view them as food. The juveniles must disperse rapidly, scattering into the smallest crevices of the rockwork where the adults cannot reach. This sudden transition from protected passenger to hunted prey forces the young crabs to learn the geography of safety within minutes of touching the ground. The visual field of the vampire crab is panoramic, but the overlap of their eyes creates a specific zone of binocular vision directly above and in front of them. This stereo zone is crucial for judging the distance of objects they need to climb or jump to. Unlike marine crabs that mostly look sideways, the vampire crab looks up. It constantly scans the canopy and the vertical surfaces. This upward gaze is an adaptation to the verticality of the rainforest. They need to see the next root, the next branch, or the bird diving from above. Their world is not a flat plane, but a tower, and their eyes are positioned to calculate the trajectory of a vertical escape route instantly. The hardness of the vampire crab's shell is directly influenced by the general hardness, GH, of the water in their habitat. While they are terrestrial, they drink and bathe in the stream. If the water is too soft, lacking dissolved calcium and magnesium, the crab's shell will become soft and rubbery after a molt, a condition that is often fatal. They require hard water to mineralize their exoskeleton. In the volcanic streams of Java, the water is naturally rich in dissolved minerals. The crab absorbs these ions through its gills and gut. The geology of the water determines the structural integrity of the animal. A vampire crab living in mineral-poor water is a fragile thing, its armor compromised by the chemistry of its drink. The structure of the vampire crab's dactyls, the pointed tips of its legs, includes microscopic sensory spines that act as feelers. These spines allow the crab to test the stability of a surface before putting its full weight on it. When climbing a rotting log or a slippery moss patch, the crab taps gently with its dactyls. If the sensory spines detect that the moss is loose or the wood is crumbling, the crab adjusts its footing. This tactile feedback loop allows them to navigate treacherous, decaying terrain without falling. They are free solo climbers who read the rock with their toes, sensing the friction and the sheer strength of the surface with every step. The burrow fidelity of the vampire crab is a behavioral trait that indicates a strong sense of home. Once a crab digs or claims a suitable burrow, it will return to it repeatedly after foraging trips. It navigates back to this specific hole using landmark memory and chemical cues. The burrow becomes a central hub for its life. It cleans the burrow, pushing out waste and fallen debris. Over time, the area around the burrow entrance becomes a patio of packed mud. This fidelity reduces the risk of predation. The crab always knows exactly where the nearest safe hole is. It does not wander aimlessly. It commutes, traveling in a loop that always brings it back to the safety of its own front door. The interaction between the vampire crab and the rainy season involves a vertical migration to avoid drowning. While they need moisture, they cannot survive being submerged for weeks at a time. When the heavy monsoons raise the river levels, flooding the lower banks, the crabs migrate upward. They climb the tree trunks and the high rocks, moving into the epiphytic zone of the forest. They wait out the floods in the hanging gardens of ferns and orchids. This seasonal vertical movement prevents them from being swept away by the raging currents. They become temporary tree dwellers, watching the brown, churning floodwaters from the safety of the Mars canopy until the river recedes and they can reclaim their muddy kingdoms. The feeding fans of the vampire crab are tiny, hair-like structures on their mouth parts that help them filter feed from the wet mud. While they are primarily scavengers of large particles, they can also consume the biofilm, the layer of bacteria and algae that coats the wet stones. They use their claws to scrape this slime toward their mouths, where the feeding fans sift through it. This allows them to exploit a food source that is invisible to the naked eye. In times of scarcity, when fruit and leaves are hard to find, the crab can survive by licking the rocks, subsisting on the microscopic meadow that grows on every wet surface in the rainforest. The chemical defense of auto-hemorrhaging or reflex bleeding is a controversial capability in crustaceans, but vampire crabs exhibit a variation of it. When extremely threatened, they can regurgitate a dark, foul-smelling liquid from their stomachs. This enteric fluid is acidic and bitter, derived from the tannins in their diet. It coats their mouthparts and claws. If a predator bites them, it gets a mouthful of this noxious chemical. It acts as a taste deterrent. The crab effectively weaponizes its own digestion, turning the contents of its stomach into a chemical shield that makes it too disgusting to eat. The phenomenon of cryptic female choice may play a role in the reproduction of vampire crabs. Even after mating, the female crab can store sperm from multiple males in specialized receptacles called spermathecae. She may have the physiological ability to choose which sperm fertilizes her eggs, or the sperm may compete within her. This means that the male who wins the territorial dance is not necessarily the father of the offspring. The female retains the final control over her genetic investment. It adds a layer of invisible complexity to their mating rituals. The public display on the riverbank is just the opening negotiation, while the true decision is made internally in the secret biology of the female's reproductive tract. The thermal limits of the vampire crab confine it to a narrow band of existence. They thrive between 22 and 28 degrees Celsius. If the temperature drops below 20 degrees, their metabolism slows to a dangerous crawl. They stop eating and moving. If it rises above 30 degrees, they suffer heat stress and their oxygen demand outstrips their gill capacity. They are thermal specialists. This sensitivity binds them to the shaded, stable microclimate of the rainforest stream. They cannot cross the hot, sun-baked open fields or the cold, high-altitude ridges. They are prisoners of the comfortable middle, trapped in the Goldilocks zone of the jungle, where the air is warm but never hot, and cool but never cold. Deep within the verdant, cup-like structures of the carnivorous pitcher plants that dot the rainforest floor, a specific lineage of vampire crabs has evolved to conquer a micro-habitat that is hostile to almost every other form of life. These phytothermic crabs have abandoned the riverbank entirely to live inside the water-filled wells of the Nepenthes plants. The fluid inside a pitcher plant is a digestive enzyme cocktail, an acidic soup designed to dissolve insects that fall in. However, these specialized crabs have evolved an exoskeleton and a gill chemistry that is resistant to the acid. They treat the pitcher plant not as a trap, but as a private fortified swimming pool. They climb the slippery, waxy walls of the plant with ease, scavenging the insects that have drowned in the fluid. By stealing the plant's meal, they act as kleptoparasites, but they also provide a service by breaking down the larger insect carcasses into smaller particulate matter that the plant can absorb more easily. It is a dangerous residency, living inside the stomach of a plant, a chemical daring act where the crab swims through the digestive juices of its landlord to find its daily meal. The phenomenon of estivation is a survival strategy employed by vampire crabs during the unpredictable dry spells that can hit the tropics. When the rains fail and the water table drops, the mud of the riverbank begins to crack and harden. To avoid desiccation, the crab retreats deep into its burrow and engages in an architectural defense. It builds a mud plug. Using its claws, it packs wet soil into the entrance of the tunnel, sealing itself inside. This plug hardens in the sun, creating an airtight cap that traps the humidity inside the burrow. In this sealed chamber, the crab enters a state of dormancy. Its heart rate drops, and it stops moving to conserve water and oxygen. It can remain in this suspended animation for weeks, waiting for the sound of heavy rain to soften the mud plug so it can break out. It is a self-imposed entombment, a waiting game played in the dark, cool silence of the earth. The accumulation of calcium is a lifelong obsession for the vampire crab, driving it to engage in the consumption of terrestrial snails. In the mineral-poor soils of some rainforests, the crab must hunt for calcium sources to maintain its shell. When it finds a snail, it does not just eat the soft flesh, it systematically dismantles the shell. Using its claws like pliers, it chips away at the spiral, consuming the calcium carbonate fragments. This behavior, known as osteophagy or shell-eating, allows the crab to recycle the minerals of the forest. The crunching sound of a vampire crab dismantling a snail shell is one of the few audible noises they make, a tiny, rhythmic grinding that signals the transfer of armor from one animal to another. The ghost of the snail becomes the shell of the crab, a mineral inheritance passed down through the violent mechanics of predation. The aging process of a vampire crab is visible in the fading brilliance of its coloration, a slow bleaching caused by the oxidation of pigments and the wear of the cuticle. A young, freshly molted crab is a jewel of deep purple and neon orange, its shell pristine and shiny. But as the crab ages and molts become less frequent, the shell begins to weather. The purple dulls to a slate grey, and the orange fades to a rusty yellow. The carapace becomes scratched and pitted from years of digging and fighting. Old crabs often look like ancient, weathered stones, their vibrant youth replaced by a rugged matte finish that blends even more perfectly with the mud. This greying is a badge of survival, a visual marker of a veteran who has navigated the dangers of the forest floor long enough to lose their shine but keep their life. The interaction between vampire crabs and the aggressive weaver ants of the rainforest is a chemical and physical war over territory. Weaver ants are fiercely territorial predators that swarm over the vegetation. If a crab climbs onto a branch claimed by ants, it is immediately attacked. The ants bite the soft joints of the crab's legs and spray formic acid. The vampire crab's defense is its armor, which is impervious to the acid, and a behavior called shaking. The crab will vibrate its body and flick its legs violently to dislodge the ants. If overwhelmed, the crab will drop from the branch, plummeting to the forest floor to escape. This vertical retreat is a standard maneuver. The crab is a heavy tank compared to the light infantry of the ants, and it uses gravity as its escape route, falling out of the war zone to land with a thud in the safety of the wet leaves. The begging behavior of juvenile vampire crabs is a rare instance of communication between offspring and parent in the crustacean world. In the first few days after hatching, when the tiny crabs are still clustered near the mother, they may tap her legs or mouthparts with their antennae. This tactile stimulation can trigger the mother to drop small pieces of food she is eating, or at least to pause her feeding to allow them to scavenge the scraps. It is a primitive form of food solicitation. While the mother does not actively feed them like a bird feeds a chick, her tolerance of their theft is a passive form of provisioning. This brief window of charity allows the juveniles to gain their first meal without exposure to the dangers of the open hunt, a moment of family dining before the inevitable dispersal. The role of epibionts on the shell of the vampire crab turns the animal into a walking microhabitat. Older crabs, which molt infrequently, often accumulate a garden on their backs. Microscopic algae, moss spores, and sessile protozoans attached to the carapace. In the humid air, these hitchhikers stay alive. A very old crab might have a greenish fuzz growing on its back. This living camouflage helps break up the crab's outline even further. The crab becomes a mobile piece of the forest floor, carrying a patch of the ecosystem on its back. It is a symbiotic relationship where the crab gets camouflage and the hitchhikers get a free ride to new food sources, traveling across the jungle on the armored bus of the crab's shell. The shadow reflex of the vampire crab is a neurological hardwire designed to defeat avian predators. The crab's eyes are constantly scanning the canopy. If a shadow passes over them, representing a bird in flight or a falling branch, the crab freezes instantly. This reflex happens faster than conscious thought. It is a signal that bypasses the higher brain and goes straight to the legs. The crab stops mid-step, often with one leg raised. By freezing, it blends into the background clutter. The shadow passes, and after a calculated pause, the crab reanimates. This game of statues is played dozens of times a day, a stuttering walk through the forest where every cloud and every falling leaf triggers a momentary paralysis of caution. The specific geometry of the vampire crab's chelae, or claws, reveals a sexual dimorphism tailored for specific tasks. The male's claws are not just larger, they are shaped differently. The fingers of the claw are often curved to leave a gap when closed, a shape ideal for grasping the round limbs of females during mating or the claws of rivals during fights. The female's claws are straighter and fully closing, designed for the precision work of picking up eggs and grooming. The male is built for grappling. The female is built for dexterity. This divergence in tool design reflects their different priorities in life. The male focuses on acquisition and defense, while the female focuses on maintenance and care, each carrying a toolkit evolved for their specific role in the survival of the species. The hydric regulation behavior involves the crab positioning itself in specific microclimates to manage its water loss. A vampire crab will move a few inches up or down a slope to find the perfect humidity. They can sense moisture gradients that humans cannot feel. If the air gets too dry, they move closer to the water. If the soil gets too sodden, they climb a rock. They are constantly fine-tuning their position in the landscape. This micro-migration means that the population of crabs on a riverbank is in constant flux, shifting like a slow tide of purple shells moving in response to the invisible changes in the water vapor pressure of the air. The acoustic dampening properties of the mossy burrows create a zone of silence where the crab can rest. The dense, wet soil and the layers of moss absorb high-frequency sounds. Inside the burrow, the noise of the rainforest, the screaming cicadas, the calling birds is muffled. This quiet allows the crab to detect the low-frequency vibrations of a predator digging or walking nearby. The burrow is a sensory deprivation tank that filters out the white noise of the jungle, allowing the crab to focus on the seismic signals of immediate danger. It is a sanctuary of silence in a world of noise, a quiet room where the crab can lower its vigilance and sleep. The fecal pellets produced by the vampire crab play a role in the nutrient cycling of the burrow itself. The crabs defecate inside or near their burrows. These pellets are rich in processed organic matter and bacteria. They become food for the springtails and nematodes living in the soil. These smaller creatures break the waste down further, releasing nitrogen and phosphorus that are absorbed by the roots of the plants, stabilizing the burrow. The crab is essentially fertilizing the roof of its own house. The health of the moss covering the burrow entrance is often superior to the surrounding moss, a lush doormat fed by the metabolic activity of the resident, creating a feedback loop that strengthens the architecture of the home. The vulnerability of the vampire crab to osmotic shock during heavy rain is a chemical hazard of the freshwater life. Pure rainwater has almost no dissolved salts. If a crab is washed into a pool of fresh rainwater, the osmotic pressure gradient between its salty blood and the pure water is immense. Water tries to flood into the crab's cells. To combat this, the crab must urinate constantly to expel the excess water. This is metabolically exhausting. During a storm, the crab is not just fighting the current, it is fighting the chemistry of the water itself, running its internal pumps at maximum capacity to keep its blood from becoming too diluted. A microscopic battle for salt balance fought in the deluge. The territorial bubbles of the vampire crab are invisible spheres of personal space that dictate the density of the colony. Each crab maintains a small radius around itself, perhaps only a few inches, which it defends. If another crab enters this bubble, a display or a fight ensues. The size of this bubble changes with the resource availability. If food is plentiful, the bubble shrinks, and crabs will tolerate neighbors closer by. If food is scarce, the bubble expands and the colony spreads out. This elasticity of territory allows the population to adjust to the boom and bust cycles of the rainforest. The riverbank is tiled with these invisible, shifting zones of ownership, a dynamic map of personal space that expands and contracts with the belly of the crab. The interaction with invasive species, such as the yellow crazy ant or introduced fish, poses a new threat to the vampire crab. These invaders do not follow the rules of the rainforest. The ants swarm the burrows, overwhelming the crabs with numbers. The introduced fish eat the juveniles that venture into the water. The vampire crab has no evolutionary defense against these newcomers. Their camouflage doesn't work against scent-tracking ants. Their claws are too slow for the fish. The arrival of these alien species disrupts the millions of years of balance, forcing the crabs into a retreat, pushing them higher into the mountains or deeper into the substrate in a desperate attempt to find a refuge from the invaders. The claw-waving dialects of different Geosasama species suggest that they have evolved distinct languages of gesture. A male Geosasama denala, purple, waves his claws in a different tempo and pattern than a male Geosasama hagen, red. One might use a jerky up and down semaphore, while the other uses a smooth lateral wave. These dialects prevent crossbreeding. A female of one species does not recognize the courtship dance of the other. This behavioral isolation reinforces the genetic separation. The forest floor is filled with these silent languages, a Tower of Babel where each species speaks a different code of movement, ensuring that they only attract their own kind in the crowded, multi-species neighborhoods of the riverbank. The phenomenon of molt death syndrome is the leading cause of mortality for adult crabs. As the crab gets larger, the physical effort required to pull its mass out of the old shell increases. The risk of getting stuck is high. If a leg gets trapped in the old shell, the crab may autotomize it, but if the body gets stuck, the crab dies. It suffocates or is eaten by ants while helpless. The act of growing is the most dangerous thing a crab does. Every molt is a gamble with death. The forest floor is littered with the empty shells of successful molts, but also with the carcasses of those who failed, a grim reminder that growth requires a strength that eventually runs out. The flood pulse response of the vampire crab is a behavioral synchronization with the hydrology of the river. They can sense the rising water table before the surface floods. As the soil becomes supersaturated, the crabs move. They do not wait for the water to breach the bank. This anticipation saves them from being drowned in their burrows. They move to the high water mark and wait. It is a mass evacuation triggered by the pressure of the groundwater. The riverbank seems to crawl as thousands of crabs move upslope in unison. a purple wave retreating from the brown wave of the river, guided by the wetness of the earth. The thermal inertia of the vampire crab is very low due to their small size. They heat up and cool down almost instantly with the air. This means they cannot store heat. They are thermally transparent. To thermoregulate, they must use behavior. They bask in sun flecks, tiny patches of sunlight that pierce the canopy, to warm up in the morning. They press their bodies against cool, wet rocks to cool down in the afternoon. Their day is a game of hopscotch between patches of heat and cold. They are constantly adjusting their position to keep their internal chemistry running, riding the thermal landscape of the forest floor like surfers riding a wave. The night cleaning role of the vampire crab makes them the primary processors of the night shift. While birds and lizards hunt by day, the crabs clean up the mess at night. They eat the insects that died during the day, the fruit that fell in the afternoon, and the fungi that bloomed in the evening. They reset the forest floor for the next morning. Without their nocturnal grazing, the detritus would pile up, and the nutrient cycle would stall. They are the unseen workers who punch in when the sun goes down, scrubbing the floor of the jungle so that life can begin again at dawn. Deep within the unseen crevices of the vampire crab's armor, specifically in the joints where the legs meet the body, lives a community of microscopic passengers known as nematodes. These tiny, thread-like worms partake in a biological phenomenon called phoresis, which is essentially hitchhiking on a microscopic scale. The nematodes are not parasites. They do not feed on the crab's blood or tissue. Instead, they live in the film of water that coats the crab's shell, using the crab as a mobile bus to travel between food sources. The rainforest floor is a patchy environment where a pile of rotting fruit might be yards away from a decaying log. For a microscopic worm, this distance is an insurmountable desert. But by attaching themselves to the leg of a scuttling vampire crab, they can cross the ocean of the forest floor in minutes. The crab unknowingly transports these entire ecosystems of worms from one patch of moisture to another, acting as a titan of transport for the invisible life of the undergrowth, a purple vessel navigating the sea of leaves. The acoustic repertoire of the vampire crab includes a sound that is produced not by a throat, but by a musical instrument built into its shell. This behavior is known as stridulation. On the upper surface of the crab's claws, there are rows of microscopic ridges, like the teeth of a comb or the grooves of a vinyl record. When the crab is agitated or courting, it rubs its legs against these ridges in a rhythmic motion. This friction produces a high-pitched, rasping chirp, or a series of clicks, similar to the sound of a cricket, but much fainter and more metallic. In the dense, sound-dampening moss of the riverbank, this sound travels surprisingly well. It is a private language of friction, a song played on a violin made of chitin that signals territory or desire in the dark, allowing the crabs to speak to one another without alerting the visual predators that hunt by sight. The relationship between the vampire crab and the moss that carpets its home is not merely one of resident and habitat, but approaches a form of primitive gardening. The crab's constant movement and excavation aerate the soil around the moss rhizoids, and their nitrogen-rich waste acts as a targeted fertilizer. Observations suggest that the moss growing directly around the entrance of a vampire crab burrow is often thicker, greener, and more lush than the surrounding vegetation. This lush growth benefits the crab by disguising the entrance to its home and maintaining a microclimate of higher humidity right at the doorstep. The crab is essentially tending a living doormat, engaging in an inadvertent agriculture where its daily routine cultivates the very plant that hides it from the world, creating a symbiotic loop of green growth and purple shell. The phenomenon of fog drip harvesting is a hydration strategy that allows the vampire crab to survive even when it is far from the stream. In the high-altitude cloud forests of Java, the air is often saturated with mist that does not fall as rain but condenses on surfaces. The vampire crab's shell is cool and smooth. When the crab sits motionless in the mist, water vapor condenses on its carapace, forming droplets. The shape of the shell channels these droplets downward toward the mouthparts and the gill intake. The crab essentially drinks the air. It does not need to find a puddle. It simply needs to sit still and let the physics of condensation turn the atmosphere into a drink. This adaptation allows them to forage high up on tree trunks or dry rocks, untethered from the water below, sipping the cloud that settles on their backs. The freeze response of the vampire crab is triggered by ground-borne vibrations that mimic the heavy footfalls of a large mammal. While they will flee from a visual threat like a bird, the deep, rhythmic thud of a buffalo or a human walking nearby triggers a different reflex. The crab hunkers down. It presses its body flat against the mud, gripping the soil with all 8 legs to maximize contact and stability. This prevents it from being flipped over by the tremor or dislodged by the shifting earth. It becomes a part of the substrate. This instinct is a defense against being crushed. By lowering its profile and becoming a static lump, it hopes to be stepped over rather than stepped on. It is a strategy of humility, a recognition that against the giants of the world, the only defense is to become indistinguishable from the ground itself. The sexual dimorphism of the vampire crab is written most clearly on its abdomen in a geometric distinction that separates the sexes. If you were to turn a vampire crab over, gently, to avoid the claws, you would see a flap of shell folded against its belly. On the male, this abdominal flap is narrow and triangular, shaped like a lighthouse or an inverted V. It is streamlined to allow for agility and houses the simple reproductive organs. On the female, the abdomen is expansive, broad, and rounded, shaped like a beehive or a dome. It covers almost the entire underside of the crab. This width is a structural necessity. It forms the lid of the brood pouch, where she will carry her eggs and her young. The female is built as a cargo vessel, her anatomy distorted by the requirement to shield the next generation, while the male is built as a sprinter, his frame lightened for the pursuit. The larval memory of the vampire crab is a genetic ghost that haunts their development inside the egg. Although they hatch as fully formed miniature crabs, ignoring the swimming larval stages of their marine ancestors, embryos inside the egg still go through these stages. If you were to look inside a developing vampire crab egg with a microscope, you would see the embryo briefly taking the form of a zoea and a megalopa, the swimming forms of ocean crabs. They grow tiny, useless swimming appendages that are then reabsorbed before hatching. They relive their evolutionary history in the privacy of the egg. It is a biological echo, a quick recap of the journey from the sea to the land played out in fluid-filled silence before the crab is born, ready to walk on the earth. The selective breeding of vampire crabs in the global pet trade has created a new artificial evolution that runs parallel to natural selection. Hobbyists select for the brightest purples, the most vivid oranges, and the most striking white spots. In the wild, these colors might be selected against if they make the crab too visible to predators. But in the glass box of the terrarium, they are the winning traits. This has created designer lineages of crabs that are hyper-colored, far brighter than their wild cousins. These domestic populations are now genetically distinct, living art projects that reflect human aesthetics rather than the demands of the rainforest. It is a divergence of paths, where one branch of the family fights for survival in the mud, while the other evolves to match the lighting of a living room. The hormonal control of the molt is dictated by a steroid called ecdysone, which circulates in the crab's hemolymph, its blood. The production of ecdysone is inhibited by a gland in the eye stalk. This creates a fascinating biological tension. The crab's eyes are actively preventing it from growing. When the crab needs to molt, the inhibitor signal stops, and ecdysone floods the system, triggering the separation of the old shell from the new skin beneath. This means that the growth of the crab is regulated by its nervous system's interpretation of the environment. Stress, light cycles, and food availability all feed into the eye stalk, which then decides whether to release the chemical brake. The crab grows only when its eyes tell it the world is safe enough to change. The texture of a newly molted vampire crab is a sensory vulnerability that defines its behavior for days. When the crab first emerges from its old shell, its new exoskeleton has the consistency of wet paper or soft leather. It is flexible and delicate. If you were to touch it, you would feel the pulse of the crab's internal organs beneath the skin. This soft shell phase is a time of terror. The crab cannot use its claws to pinch because they would bend. It cannot run fast because its legs lack rigidity. It is purely liquid and hydrostatic pressure holding a shape. The crab must hide in the deepest, darkest burrow, waiting for the calcium to crystallize and the chitin to crosslink, turning its skin back into stone. It is a period of enforced meditation, a stillness required for the liquid to become solid. The island rule, or Foster's rule, applies to the vampire crab in a way that explains its diminutive size. In the isolated environments of islands like Java, large animals often shrink over evolutionary time to adapt to limited resources. The ancestors of the vampire crab were likely larger marine crabs, but as they moved inland into the restricted habitats of small streams and discrete valleys, being small became an advantage. A smaller body requires less food, less space, and can hide more easily. The vampire crab is a product of this miniaturization, a dwarf species forged by the constraints of island biogeography. They are the bonsai versions of the crab world, perfectly scaled to fit the finite resources of a volcanic island. The symbiotic relationship between the vampire crab and the freshwater snail, Philopeludina, is a nutritional interaction based on slime. These large, viviparous snails graze on the algae on the rocks. As they move, they leave a trail of protein-rich mucus. Vampire crabs have been observed following these snails, grazing on the slime trail. In a nutrient-poor environment, the snail's waste is a resource. Furthermore, when the snails die, their shells become the primary source of calcium for the crabs. The crab and the snail are linked in a cycle of calcium and protein, the armored tank and the armored knight of the riverbed, moving at different speeds but on the same path of survival. The rain dance of the vampire crab is a mass emergence event triggered by the scent of petrichor and the drop in pressure associated with a storm. When a heavy monsoon rain begins, thousands of crabs may emerge from their burrows simultaneously. This is not a panic, it is a harvest. The rain washes insects, fruits, and seeds into the stream banks. It creates a buffet. The crabs emerge to feast on the windfall. The forest floor, usually dotted with one or two crabs, suddenly teems with them. It is a frantic, wet festival of eating that lasts as long as the rain falls. When the storm clears, they vanish back into the mud, leaving the riverbank silent again, as if they were never there. The specific gravity of the vampire crab's hemolymph, blood, is carefully regulated to allow it to function on land. Marine crabs have blood that is isotonic with seawater, the same density. Vampire crabs have blood that is much more dilute, yet richer in proteins, like hemocyanin. This copper-based protein transports oxygen. In the high humidity of the rainforest, the efficiency of oxygen uptake is critical. The blue blood of the crab is tuned to bind oxygen avidly from the moist air in the gill chambers. If the crab dehydrates, the blood becomes too thick to circulate. The crab fights a constant battle to keep its blood thin enough to flow, but rich enough to breathe, a hydraulic balancing act maintained by its behavior. The concept of communal latrines suggests a level of social hygiene in vampire crab colonies. Observations indicate that crabs do not defecate randomly inside their deep burrows. Instead, they deposit waste near the turn, entrance, or in specific midden areas just outside. This behavior prevents the buildup of toxic ammonia and bacteria deep in the tunnel where they sleep and hydrate. By moving the waste to the patio, they allow the rain and the springtails to break it down. This spatial organization of waste is a sign of a structured home life, a refusal to soil the nest that keeps the colony healthy in the close quarters of the mud bank. The thermal regulation behavior of burrow plugging is an advanced architectural technique used during temperature extremes. If the air temperature drops too low in the mountains, the vampire crab will push a ball of mud into the entrance of its burrow, sealing it completely. This traps the Earth's heat inside, creating a geothermal pocket. The crab waits out the cold snap in this warm, sealed room. Conversely, in extreme heat, the plug keeps the cool, moist air from escaping. The crab actively manages the HVAC system of its home, using mud as a valve to control the exchange of energy between the underground and the surface. The role of driftwood in the life of the vampire crab is that of a highway system. The floor of the rainforest is cluttered and difficult to navigate. Fallen logs and branches, however, provide smooth, elevated roadways that cut through the chaos. Vampire crabs use these driftwood highways to travel long distances quickly, bypassing the rough leaf litter. They also use logs that have fallen across streams as bridges to migrate to new territories. A fallen tree is not an obstacle, it is infrastructure. The crabs patrol these wooden roads, using them to expand their range and find mates without getting their feet muddy, a network of organic overpasses that crisscross the stream. The twilight foraging peak identifies the vampire crab as a crepuscular animal, most active at dawn and dusk. This timing avoids the intense heat of midday and the deepest dark of midnight, when larger nocturnal predators are most active. The purple hour of twilight matches their body color. In the dim, low-contrast light of dusk, a purple crab is almost invisible against the gray mud and dark leaves. They utilize this window of optical ambiguity to do their most dangerous work, hunting and courting, before the true night falls. They are the spirits of the transition, appearing when the light is failing and the shadows are lengthening. The fragility of the vampire crab's microendemic status cannot be overstated. Some species exist in a range of only a few square kilometers. A single landslide, a single chemical spill, or a single development project could wipe an entire species off the face of the earth instantly. They are geographically vulnerable in a way few other animals are. Their entire history, biology, and future are contained in one small patch of wet earth. This precariousness adds a layer of preciousness to their existence. They are unique, irreplaceable jewels of evolution that are tied to specific coordinates on the map, living examples of how life can specialize until it fits perfectly into a single, tiny pocket of the world. And finally, we come to rest on the image of the vampire crab as the jewel of the mud. In the vast green darkness of the Indonesian rainforest, amidst the towering trees and the roaring waterfalls, this tiny creature carves out a life of quiet complexity. It is a master of the boundary between land and water, a climber of moss, a digger of tunnels, and a wearer of royal colors. It reminds us that looking closely at the small things reveals a grandeur equal to the open ocean. The vampire crab sits on its riverbank, its yellow eyes glowing in the mist, a silent watcher of the jungle stream, safe in the shadows of the leaves. As we retreat from the humid forest floor, leaving the scuttling crabs to their nightly business. Let the sound of the rain and the river fade into a gentle, rhythmic hum. We have traveled from the ocean to the mountain, finding the memory of the sea in the smallest of creatures. If you enjoyed this journey into the micro-wilderness of the vampire crab, I invite you to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. It helps this little vessel of curiosity find its way to other sleepy travelers. But for now, let the humidity hold you. Let the sound of the stream wash over you. You are safe. You are drifting. Good night.